Hi, everyone. I'll give you a moment to connect to sound. Welcome in. Hello and welcome to the Broken Rails 1130th New Social Environment. I'm Min, a Programs Associate here at the Rail, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation featuring Ilka Scobie, Joel Shapiro, Anne Waldman, and Phong H. Bowie on the occasion of Martha Diamond Deep Time at the Aldrich Contemporary Art Museum. And now I'll introduce today's guest and host. Ilka Scobie is a poet, writer, and native New Yorker. She has taught poetry in the public schools for decades, and she co-curates Artisti Americani and on as part of the Biennale in Soncino, Italy, the birthplace of Piero Manzoni. Her poetry book, Any Island, was published by Spuyten Duyvil in 2021. Joel Shapiro has explored the possibilities of sculptural form over the course of his over 50-year career in the arts. Since his first solo exhibition in 1970, his work has been the subject of numerous exhibitions worldwide. Joel Shapiro lives and works in New York City. Anne Waldman is a poet, professor, performer, librettist, and cultural activist. She is the author of over 60 volumes of poetry, poetics, and anthologies, including the Jovis trilogy, Colors in the Mechanism of Concealment, which won the Penn Center Literary Prize. Her book, Mesopotamia, will be published by Penguin in 2025. And our host today, Phong H. Bowie, is an artist, writer, independent curator, and co-founder, publisher, and artistic director of the Broken Rail, Rail Editions, River Rail, and Rail curatorial projects. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Anne to get us started with her reading.
Thank you so much. A great honor to be here and to be celebrating the work of the great Martha Diamond, and to also honor this great show at the Aldrich, which I hope to see soon. And I want to compliment the Levy Prombaum and Amy Smith Stewart for their excellent catalog, which includes, what do you artists call it? Anyway, it includes poetry, which is and brilliant commentary on Martha's work. And poets were always an ally for her. A lot of us met very young, and and we helped get it all started. So I'm going to read a ongoing poem around her called About the Canvas Trembling. Entanglement, Martha, a diamond of entanglement, torque past cities, cape, yellow, a Hogan, torque past sanctuary, what you are, her city, my city, stamina of heads that are buildings, are windows and mannerisms, mystic index, the necessity of shelter and mannerisms of a rumination, an outer shield, Martha, pure what you see around the bend, corner the willful, and conversation in the paint, outer attitude, shells soft and sharp encounter, no corners in a shell, a budding of mind, of windows that is beauty, is a brush past, suspicion of beauty, suspicion of determination, our eyes rising from your white of a building, not silent, not ghosts, not nervous, threatening, and mirrors that are entanglement, doors and energies, the way the wind gushes in a brush past, a scream and display of dual mind insisting it must move. And we are in the hidden love of our city, yours, the gold noir city, a cinematic symmetry, syncretic wheel of things, philosophical, what Diamond says of history and time, what she says of the shape of things in time, gone down deeper, a tree like the architectural of cities, human architecture for how we rise our shadows up. Dolmen's wisdom, Diamond says, for a dying civilization. Or painterly joy, Frisian paint is the sacrament, meant the holy grail, some for want of a religion, poetry objects in poetry, drams of weird angle in relation, the mind of the woman inside, act of paint in relation. Would I not, what not do for you? This is willfully a slash, in active relation, tacking back into the wind, downtown, mined by water, fury and love of text and textures, and nowhere a robotic person is found in clear intention, checking the guardrail as with surety, acclamation, things form the logo Poea ID, trying the night, a guard sleeps on her duties, make a wish on her magic ride, wish that the image rises and the music takes over. The little paint elves working the facades. This is the guard. Stray lashes or forms, flesh and matter and figures of absence, the trembling monster city. What message in the wreck stanza in meditation of desperation, dimension and urgency? What we live, her primordial newlessness, her good news, her being diamond, a Vajra clarity. I thought to say something about the canvas trembling, about to bend and bow, kiss the ground, prostrate your mind as you rise. Her flames, the flares, the peopleless city. I'm going to jump to the end. Our keys to it, keep tangle of the gongs, the tangle of the reins, crest of wave, riding it, vertiginous passion for living deliberately. For Martha Diamond.
Wow.
Bad.
That was amazing, Anne.
Quote that wonderful Thoreau line, I went to the woods to live deliberately. And I feel this about Martha. She followed her path.
Yep, steadily, committedly, doesn't matter what's happening around. So true. Thank you so much, Anne. Thank you again, as I follow your works. Ever since I came to New York, 1985. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm pleased, everyone. Thank you for being here with us to pay this wonderful homage and also celebrating Martha lifetime's work. And I can't wait to see the show. So I'm pleased to moderate this remarkable exhibition of our friend, the late painter, Martha Diamond. The title of the show is called Deep Time, which is a product of a wonderful co-curation by Levi Prombaum at Kobe Museum. I think it just ended last month, October 13, and also with Amy Smith's store and also mentioned at the Aldrich Contemporary Art Museum, to be open this Sunday, in fact, November 17, and remain on view. Let me see where I wrote it, till May 18 here. Yes, May 18 next year. So it's going to be a long month. So I urge that you take a train or drive there to see the show if you missed the one from Kobe Museum. I should share with you all that I first discovered Martha, her work, at the show at Robert Muller when it was in the Fuller Building, 57th Street in 1988, which stayed with me ever since. Although I met her a few times passing, but it wasn't until the summer of 2013 when I was invited to curate a huge show to commemorate the destruction of Hurricane Sandy from the previous year. And it's called Come Together Surviving Sandy Year One at Industry City, under the invitation of Jack Flam, the president of Daedalus Foundation. So I paid a lengthy visit to her wonderful Bowery studio, which prompted an inclusion of her two huge paintings and six more, I think maybe six more paintings too, that's right, in the show, which we'll talk a little minute. But I remember thinking about Martha's work. I think of monumental architectural form, just exactly how beautifully read and articulated by Anne's poem. However time they might seem frontally solid, frontal, and stable, which often appear, I think, in the smaller works. At other time, as her long friend, Frank Rose, who wrote a beautiful essay, aptly said that Martha, as both a person and an artist, she was deeply orthogonal to the world. And I love that line, orthogonal to the world. You know, what a beautiful way to write and think of Martha in such manner. It's the opposite of minimalist grid that was adopted, modified after Mondrian rectilinear forms, I think Martha prefer orthogonal, or shall we say diagonal, leaning, which evoke both sense of instability and humor. But I like to begin first asking both Joe, Ilka, and Anne. Let's maybe start with you, Joe. How did you get to know Martha and her work? And what were your impression of her then?
Well, I met Martha at Max's Kansas City, right? And I think it had to be, it had to be around 1970.
Okay.
I was impressed. I thought Martha was fabulous. We're both born in Manhattan, both kids who grew up in Queens. And I think we have lots in common. Both our fathers were physicians. I don't know. So somehow there was some instant bonding.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I thought Martha was very hip, very bright, and very fast. I mean, I think the work is fast. So it's kind of explosive and quick, and
Yeah.
I don't know, some commonality in terms of my own intent. So we remained friends over the years. I should have been friendlier, spent more time, but like everybody else, I get preoccupied with my own situation. And I thought her work was terrific. We have two little paintings in our house, or I should say apartment. It's not a house. They're very rewarding. I think she's great. And I think she was deeply this is something came up yesterday in terms of the art world ignoring Martha. I don't think the art world ignored her. Maybe the economic aspect of it did. But I think she was deeply well considered by other painters and fellow artists.
Yeah.
At least that's my take.
Yeah. No, that's
Always considered really interesting and a kind of critical part of the discourse.
Yeah.
A certain position, and she stuck to it, and it's a remarkable body of work. I too will go to Greenwich. Is that where that museum is?
Connecticut, yeah. Not
somewhere.
Yeah.
Oh,
I go with you. Let's make a day. We'll go together, Joe. Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful remembrance. What about you, Anne?
I met Martha early on, probably late or mid to late 60s. Well, we were both back in the city. I also grew up in New York City. I'm still here on McDougal Street. Martha lived across the street for a while with Donna Dennis, and she was instantly serious. She was a serious artist already, and she'd had this experience in Paris. She'd come back. I'd forgotten when she was back at home. She'd gone off to Carleton, and I met her right after that period with Peter Sheldall and Donna, and they were this great triad of good energy and news in town. So we were seeing quite a bit of each other. There were lots of things going on in my living room on St. Mark's Place at that time. And the poetry project had started in 66 officially, with the Office of Economic Opportunity under Lyndon Johnson and all that, and the film scene, the poetry project, and Theater Genesis. So she was a regular there. There were lots of things afterwards at the apartment, and here, socially, I saw her quite a bit. I was, of course, very involved with the survival of the project and so on, and keeping it going and raising more money after the grant went out, and et cetera. But she was also had done, I think, some flyers and covers, that sort of thing. We drew on our artist friends. But I always felt that allegiance to her work, her vision, knowing, when we're young and eager and ready and in the heart of it all in Manhattan, and also it's our city. We grew up here. We know the streets. We're My father worked downtown, etc. She had, you know, her doctor father who had driven her as a child around the streets. And so that sense of also being women together really connected that way on a kind of first wave, or being able to, you know, hold the conversations, be present, show up, be curious. I remember people, Carter Radcliffe at the apartment, all kinds of people looking at things on walls, doing collaboration, doing a little mimeo. We had a huge mimeo operation at St. Mark's. So she was there and she was finding her way. I think she was moving into paint eventually, into oil from earlier modes, sketching, notes. And then you know, I went to Boulder, and when I had to figure out the Jack Kerouac School, another assignment. She see her, and you know, I wasn't in touch with her with that period. But I also wanted to say what Joel was saying. I don't think she was being neglected, certainly not by the poets. And I find the writing in this catalog, which is great, and those pieces from Eileen E. Miles, from Bill Berkson, from Vincent. I mean, these are reliable, visionary poets, and able to articulate a very interesting way that artists go about their lives and what they do. So that's just inspiring to me. I feel she will be carried. She has a lot of allies.
Yeah, thank you, Anne. That's true. You mentioned Peter Sherrill. I think he might have been still remain as a poet the time you guys first met him, before giving it all up entirely, poetry, in order to become an art critic. So thank you for that insight. What about you, Ilka? When did you first,
I moved back to New York in 1985 from London after not living in my hometown for many years. I was a bit discombobulated. And I think I met Martha through Janet Fish, the painter, or maybe Carol Ross, the painter. And anyway, Martha and I immediately became quick friends. We had much in common. And as I said, I was living on Mulberry. She was on the Bowery, and we spent a lot of time together. As Anne was saying, poets had always been part of her world. So she would come to my readings happily. I didn't even have to hassle her to do that. And we went to many, many galleries together. You know, at the time, you know, Soho was still a gallery hub, so we would just wander over to there. And I spent a lot of time with her, and her work always dazzled me. You know, I just thought her work was fabulous. You know, when I first came back to New York in 85, there was a lot of attention to like a lot of male art. And I just found her work to be among the best that I was, you know, seeing. And my husband's a photographer, Luigi Cazzaniga. They had their own independent relationship. And actually the paintings that I own of hers was work that they exchanged. And then when I moved to Great Jones Street, by that time, Martha's career had become a little less hot. And those of us who knew and loved her, Martha was not a domestic goddess. So if I'd be cooking a dinner that I thought she would like, I'd call her at 5 o'clock. So she spent a lot of time, you know, we would have meals together, go to restaurants together. And I knew her intimately until the end of her life. And, you know, when COVID hit, it was such a hard time, and it was particularly hard for her. And by this point, Olivia Funk had come into Martha's life, who actually gave her a new breath and new energy. And much of the show and much of Martha's current success is because Olivia has single-mindedly pursued that. I don't know if the rest of you know her, but she just did an amazing job of organizing and keeping Martha alive through, you know, a very tough moment. And
amazing.
so
maybe Olivia's here in our Zoom at the moment, Ilka. If not, we can certainly send her a link so she can, you know, see it later. But look at this photograph for a moment. How wonderful and how agile the way that she leans against.
This was how her studio was. She was forever painting it white. You know, every few months she would, you know, paint everything white. Her studio was immaculate.
Yeah, and you know, it just think of what Frank Rose mentioned earlier in his essay that I mentioned. You know, the orthogonal leaning. You know, I thought of it just because I know that not long ago I reread this beautiful book on Paolo Uccello by Sir John Pope Hennessy, when he described about the horses in San Romano, how they managed to die in perspective, frozen in that incredible symmetry. But in her work, the amazing orthogonal linen, I thought be nice to start right the first image. If we can begin, Min. It's an untitled painting from 73. You can see here, it's a rare painting in a way that because it's evoked nature instead of what she's known for as a, city painter, an urban environment. So you see in the left, a series of rather thin painted straight lines in slight diagonal, leaning to the right, sort of sitting in somewhat in the background, caught in the light. And then on the right, immediate right, is densely and irregular painted in chromatic green in a way, and heavily gestured, leaning to the left, suggesting that it's rooted in the foreground. Right below is a few brushstrokes in blue, pink, and that two red line, all converging on the middle of the bottom, therefore anchoring the whole painting. Quite amazing. And then if you see the next image, high C. And I think it's such a classic tilted and distorted Martha perception in New York City, leaning to the right in midday. I'm sure you all seen some of these paintings, and feel free, and Joe and Ilka, to make comment as I go through this. Some of the
I see actually hung in her bedroom for many years.
you have, okay. So you know the painting quite
Yes.
well. Okay, next is we have facade. Now she leaned to the right. I mean, that was daytime and now it's nighttime. Both buildings, leaning to the right, one in front and one behind, but you don't see that. I mean, this is ghost actually. So it's a singular image, painted probably wet to wet. We'll discuss that in a minute. I think the next one is facade. Here's the one that I meant to say earlier about two buildings leaning to the right. And what I love about this painting is the energy is painted below the window. And that's painted, I'm sure, wet to wet, just before the window or the grid get painted right on top of it. And then, as he spoke so lovingly about how early on she admired Franz Klein, so we can go directly to Franz Klein's The Chair. I don't know, some of you seen it, but this is a classic Klein, 1950. I don't know how to describe it, except that it's leaning to the right on the bottom, the seat, while the back post is leaning to the left. It's almost like a melted Mondrian in a way, but at the same time, it's mediate between the distribution of positive and negative space. And it's, I don't know. I mean, if you have anything, if you remember at all, Martha ever spoke to you three about Franz Klein. And if come of it, you can always come and bring it up later. But I think what I like to think about right now is make me laugh so much. If I remember the few show when I mentioned Robert Mueller 88, but then I show many show of her later also, and this sort of leaning is a way to imply that you just surrender to the orthogonals, but I couldn't help but to think of the master of body language in a way, Charlie Chaplin, with the weird bands of his way of walking. I mean, the sense of humor in Martha, that's what I mean. The left and right movement, which not only funny enough to make us laugh at him, but to laugh at ourselves. And I always felt when I see those buildings leaning to the left, to the right. And I also wanted to mention that what we seen in the next few images, what Joe say early on, when Joe might have shared something in common. So if we go to the next image here, well, it's not quite Joe, but this is still thinking about speed. I know she also admire urban abstraction by de Kooning. This is Merit Parkway. This is painted more or less when he was going back and forth from the city to East Hampton, where he's about to build his dream studio. And this is a extension of what he called content is a glimpse. You know, when you think in the sort of outside of your central axis of vision. And I know that this notion of speed and glimpses is what sometimes you see it, how she apply her own paint too. Let's see, we can also, yeah, I like to talk about this a little bit too, here. The notion of speed and elasticity. I think how things get manipulated, time particularly. At the same time, the city photographic charisma or its aura is something that Alex have talked a great deal in his cityscapes. And I know that he had a relationship with Martha as committed to paint the city for so many decades, you know, and the idea of expanded field and expanded time, which doesn't just rely on cropping, although both of them use dramatic competent time, but also the mastery handling of brushwork. Again, the idea of wet onto wet paint application is very hard to handle. I mean, for all painter, we all know this. And we see here Alex cityscape. I would put it as the way I think of Alex is realism in the hurry, as opposed to de Kooning previous Merit Parkway is a passing glimpse. And I think we have another one of Alex coming up. Here's a classic Alex. It's a monumental painting you can see there. And I thought maybe interesting in the context of Alex and de Kooning, I thought of somehow adding to photograph by Rudy Burkhardt, someone who I know Martha admire, as we all admire, although this is taken, the classic flat iron taken in 1940. We also have another, I think this Broadway toward Union Square. Anne, you were saying something, please.
No, it's very cinematic in Alex's, and it's, you know, it makes you think of Rear Window and a kind of, you know, this inner and outer peeking into, but also this kind of facade, and then abstract in a way, but it's very, very cinematic. And I'm glad you went to Rudy.
Yeah,
Nice
Joe, do you have
there.
anything to add?
Me? I'm curious. I've never watched Martha paint. I mean, somebody must have. I mean, how fast was she? It looks like it's very fast painting. Any comment on that?
I never saw her paint, but I know that she was doing those studies with great energy. And, you know, that I would see her, let's say on a Monday, and then Friday, she would have like 6 studies, and then she would jump into one maybe for a big painting, but I never sat with her when she painted.
No, I mean, they just have so much energy. And I read the catalog someplace, but I mean, I really do think she's showing you how she perceives the city with speed and movement. And I think that's where the tilting right and left comes from. And anybody who's projecting their thought onto a construct like a canvas,
yeah,
I mean, you're not going to comply, you know, with the edge, with the form.
Mm-hmm.
You can project yourself beyond that, hopefully.
Yeah,
So, I mean,
but you know, Joe, it's
I mean, it's a, you know, it makes total sense as an artist. So
yeah.
she's not really doing mimetic stuff. I mean, she's not doing detail and
Mm-hmm.
not trying to render a scene. I mean, she's really presenting an experience and about her perception of the city and who she is in the city, or as somebody who's walking through the city or going through the city.
Yeah.
I mean, as a kid, before she moved to Queens, I think she was living in Stuyvesant Town, and so
Right,
she
that's-
said that she would, look at the windows constantly. And I know that she had a particular love for Alex's night city paintings. You know,
Mhm.
whenever they were exhibited, she would really be excited. She thought that they were marvelous. And
Let's not forget Yvonne.
excuse me,
Let's not forget Yvonne Jacquet.
Yvonne
I love Yvonne Jacquet's work very much, but I don't
All
remember
those,
Martha
all
ever
those
talking about it to me.
city at night paintings.
Oh, those were amazing. Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
they're great.
What
Yeah.
about what about the notes she would sometimes prepare? Maybe it was for the larger oils, but there's some note in the catalog. But I wonder if those are in an archive matched up with the particular paintings and to know something about the speed, the speed or the.
Yeah, no, but that's a valid point. I just want to add what Joe mentioned about Yvonne's painting. Yvonne's painting is really often, committed to the bird eyes view, Joe.
Right.
Slightly different perspective for sure, but just adding to what Anders mentioned now, I don't know how extensively pursuing a very legible, clear process, because we all know as Alex paint, he always very carefully mediated from the very beginning, small sketch, and then make the painting sturdy, and then he'll blow it up on the big canvas, and then using the prickling technique, very careful drew before he attacked the canvas. But one thing they share in common is I guess, one attack per canvas. However, that attack may last 2 hours, 3 hours, a whole day, they share that common, one-shot painting, so to speak. And you feel that urgency, whereas the classicism in Alex is very visible, whereas her intensified application of speed is much, much more aggressively applied than Alex. But we can't say that. Alex will kill me. Can't really talk about the two differently. But can we now look at the smaller works? Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, and Martha's point of view is from the ground, right?
Yes,
Yvonne's.
that's true.
You want them hung higher.
Yeah,
Yes.
but they're all, yeah, she, I mean, like, she's going through it. She's in the city.
Yeah.
I'm more in the city.
So I thought also be interesting to look at this body of work here. Some are watercolor, and these are single images in central axis of the picture plane. If we look at this one is a watercolor, can we see the next one? Similarly, it's oil on paper. And then I thought we might just look at some of your works, Joe, some of your drawings.
But I've never seen these.
Okay, but you do. Here's one of Joe, 79. And then we have another image of Joe right here. And I know that you guys might not show each other's work, but you were thinking somehow some similar concern about these forms. You never seen them, right, Joe?
No, I never saw those small paintings of
Nor did I.
watercolors of Martha.
Yeah.
I mean, they're absolutely interesting, but I'm sure they're, I'm looking at them. I have this 13-inch computer. It's really dinky.
Right. Okay. Well, that's why it's not.
Well, I think people, you know, if you're visual, you're trying to find a form that expresses some sense of the moment or of the past.
Right. Right.
I think people, there's a lot of similarity. And I think, you know, that's what I was talking earlier, that, you know, Martha was an active part of the art world. It was part of a conversation, which is the most interesting aspect of it.
Yeah.
I find that going on in generationally. There's almost a kind of telepathy going on in New York, and you know, you're affected and very, you know, you have your personal reality and so on, and this kind of but this rhizomic experience of one another's work that can be fleeting or studied. But I welcome that resonance between people.
That's why we're here. But there was one moment I was at Martha's studio and I was doing some painting in 72.
Yeah.
Little canvases. And I sort of talked about Martha. I began talking about them to Martha, or maybe I was being, I don't know, I forget what I was saying. So maybe I was explaining them, and Martha said, "I have eyes." Which, okay, I shut up. But I mean, it was somehow that she was very visually acute, and she saw stuff and went to exhibitions, and you know, in the art world, and generationally, as you say, there was a lot going on, and you could see a lot of it, and it, you know, it was all clustered kind of. Unlike now, it's not.
Yeah, I love what Anne said there. Zomatic, you know, things that you picked up in the air. Absolutely. So I thought maybe we can see the next few images, Min.
Get rid of that image.
Here it is. It's about Martha. It's not about Joe. Not about Joe. All right, that's fair. But look at this for a minute, Joe, Ilka, and then
that's nice.
It's fantastic. I never seen it. It's paint on aluminum, but I felt like the central axis of the image in the picture plane is fascinating to me. The way it's painted, also those two stack
right have a lot of volume.
A lot of volume, a lot of repetition.
It almost looks like a Philip Guston. I mean, I know it's not, but
yes,
you know, Guston show in 72 blew everybody away. I don't know if that was the date, but that was one of the critical exhibitions in New York.
Yes. Well, you remember, I know that this is before his infamous show at Marlborough, where it's completely figural in 1980. But you're absolutely right, because it was this time that he was moving.
I thought that big show was 70, the big first show.
1970, sorry.
Yeah, right. It was.
Yeah, I don't mean that. He died 1980. Sorry, Joe.
Yeah, it was some real confirmation, and it liberated a lot of people to, you know, not function in such a formal way, and it opened up a lot of space.
That's right. Ming, the next one is the two painting, which I guess categorized as set, but the stacking is here. Yep, the next one is okay too. It's very similar, and I thought be interesting to show your early work, Joe. This is 80s.
Don't you think this is sort of the skeleton of architecture? I guess it isn't.
It is.
I don't know.
Yeah, you can say it's a pyramidal form, certainly ancient form, architectural form. But look at the Joe's piece. If you can go to the next image, Min. This is 71. I think this is when you returned from India. Am I right, Joe?
Well, I got back from India in 65 or 66.
Okay.
I definitely looked at a lot of stacked stuff in India, mostly cow dung on walls. But I was always but I was always, but it wasn't so much as how those things were organized subsequently. Yeah, I was trying to figure out what to do. And I didn't have that much to do. I mean, I was stiff.
Well, I was
I
interested.
like it. Yeah.
I do. I mean, I saw the show of the early work at Craig Starr a year ago, and I remember I read these works, Joe, as a form of counting time. The stacking is part of it,
Yeah, well,
but
I think I was just trying to pile stuff up until it developed some meaning to me. But it's kind of magical thinking.
right.
But I mean,
Can we
absolutely
have another angle?
Huh?
Can we have another I think here it is. Yeah.
That's better on that funky studio. That was my studio on Leonard Street, a dump. It was great though. But I mean,
Say a few
the
more
whole
things
studio
about
was
how.
full of clay. I mean, it was all over.
Yeah.
Stacks.
Okay.
Most of them thrown out.
What I like so much is this sense of kind of in media res, that there's something going on, but you enter it at any point. It isn't, I mean, it's a kind of timeless idea of how we, enter our space.
Yeah, and when something goes, I was trying to attribute meaning. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I don't think that has. I think in those days, work was kind of very fundamental, and I think that aspect was something that Martha would have been interested in, and has a kind of close tie to the way she's painting. I mean, there's not a lot of, detail in her work. It's very straightforward, as this was.
Well, I was thinking on as you stack, just as we saw Martha's previous two paintings, you pile it up, but there's a moment that it would just collapse and fall, and
Yeah,
I
so
did that with sticks. I did these things. I was throwing dowels,
right.
the wood and building forms, just throwing them in. A lot of people were doing that. It wasn't as if it was just me.
no, it's very manual labor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Making.
Here's another one. Go ahead, man. Yeah.
I prefer that one. I rolled those out.
Wow.
Anyway.
72. Okay, so now we can look at Martha, two untitles. If you can go next image. I thought interesting to look at these two paintings. So it's both vertical, horizontal anchor in the grid, but then this orthogonal form going across from each other in the middle. I think the next one is the same. Differently because this one go to the edge, it's more aggressively dealing with all the four edges instead of going deep into the space. And I never seen this before, so I'm eager to see them in flash. I mean, I only saw them in the book. Very interesting. So I don't know how to describe it, but accept the fact that it's so unexpected, diagonal. It's as if she has created her own, I don't know, redeployment of cubism, but with highly charged with speed, her own speed. And I'm fascinated of these two paintings. And then I thought it'd be nice if we can go to the idea of how the painted image can be frontal, can be solid, moving from that frontality to the symbolic. So if we see the next, so I thought these are the painting, the sick painting, the small paintings that I asked whether it can be grouped together. Although Martha painted them independently, and when I proposed, is it possible that we can just group them on this very particular configuration? and she really liked it. She liked the idea. She approved it. So that was very thrilling for me to have her blessing, to see these group of painting as a kind of thought unfold as the way she painted them independently. And as Martha say, you might remember, I'm not interested in I'm paraphrasing now, sorry, but she said that she's not interested in the notion of a vision. She's more interested in the notion of vision than she was interested in expressionistic ethos. I just wanted to point out that she wanted to paint that vision as realistically as she could. So that's interesting to me. You know, how do you paint your vision realistically? That means wherever emerge in your head, you paint that immersion of image. I think that's where it is. Paint her perception and emotion. Like, I guess the person that come to mind, if you go to the next one, Min, this is interesting. She make many painting of this modest size.
Yes, she did. And those are the ones that she would have in her studio. You know, she would have a dozen up on the wall, and then a few days later she would take them down and put up a dozen more. And she always called them untitled, which made me absolutely mad.
Yeah, say more about that, Ilka.
Well, I mean, as you know, she was a great reader, and she loved poetry and she loved language. And I would say to her, and when I was writing about her work, it would be Untitled One, 1992, Untitled. I'd say, can't you come up with titles? And she said, no, she just didn't even want to deal with it. So she had many, many beautiful things that were untitled, which was her deliberate choice.
I understand that.
But it makes writing about it a little, confusing.
Try organizing a body of work with everything untitled. It's tough.
What do you think that is, Anne? Why not give a title or name?
Well, I think of her Hogan, the sense of a sanctuary, a shelter, a container you can go inside, you can feel, and it also has this animal quality. What is it made of? It could be, some kind of bird collecting parts, a kind of magpie collecting bits and pieces, and it's so impressively sturdy for the fragmentariness. I was going to ask Ilka about the lines around it and the colors of many of these others. I mean, would there be a sort of series in these separate days you described where she put up new ones?
Well, the ones that Phong had showed, which were like church series, she was obsessing on that for a while. And when you just come back from Italy, and I'd sent her a couple of postcards, and she was very interested in church as structure, which of course she was an absolutely, as you know, non-religious person, but she liked that very much. But then she did a lot of like these strange floating abstractions with kind of lurid colors, and I would ask her where they came from, and she would just like smile enigmatically, because they would be so odd and so unexpected, because I'd come to see her as doing these gestural abstract urban things, and then they would have these like weird shamanic kind of visionary things, which I loved. And unfortunately she didn't do too many of them in big sizes.
But artists can't necessarily articulate what the content is. So otherwise they wouldn't make a painting.
It's just
so I mean to attribute language to it is challenging,
Yeah.
But I see in the early works she had titles. I was noticing that in the catalog that a lot of the early works were quite lyrically titled, and then I think maybe she just moved on and she was more interested in creating the images than coming up with monikers.
Monikers the right word.
Yeah. I like the little door in this. Seems like there's a little door there
on the bottom. Yeah, but
a metal.
There is actually. It's a
I like the framing too, Anne. The four corner.
So this is architecture again.
Right.
Exactly, Joe. Exactly.
This is more hardscape. You can do landscape, hardscape, portraiture. What else can you do?
It's true.
That's it, right?
It looks animal architect, something an animal would make.
Yeah.
Nest.
A nest.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a way of me showing this. Is there a way of me showing this painting, this very small painting of Martha's?
Well,
We can
Well,
see
How does,
probably
Lee, can you tell me how to do it?
put it more right up. That's it.
Okay.
up.
This,
Back off a little bit.
okay. This very strange 8 by 10, my husband fell in love with, and it was so, in a way, un-Martha. And so she gave it to him. And people, when I tell them that it's a Martha diamond, people hardly believe it because they're expecting these abstractions. But she was working with the figure and having fun with it.
Yeah,
So one that we ended up with.
that's cool. But I thought, Elka, I thought what I kind of mentioned early on, that when she declared that she only wanted to paint the vision as realistically as she could, I thought of immediately of Forrest Bass, who wouldn't paint anything unless he had a vision in his head. Can we see the next image, Ming? Which is a good example for us best here. It's called Stick, Simply Stick. And he only paint the size of his head, really. I love what Jonathan Swiss once thought of it. Vision is the art of seeing things invisible. And I thought, I know that I talked to Martha about Forrest Bass, that she showed several show when it was up in Herschen Adler Modern, when Betty Cunningham was running it in the late 80s and early 90s. So she was an admirer of Forrest Bass. So I thought it'd be nice to throw him in there in the mix. As you know, he was a self-taught artist. I think he was a fisherman and lived in Bayside City in Texas, outside of Austin. And a hero for many artists, including.
Well, there certainly feels like a similar dialogue with some of her pieces. Absolutely. She never mentioned him to me, though. It's not an artist that, we ever spoke about.
Yeah. Well, we talked about it at the show when I visited her too before the Sandy show. But anyway, I thought it'd be interesting to bring that into the mix. I don't, well, it's that's okay, Joe. Maybe it's a fleeting thing, just like you talk about title and whatnot. But can we now focus on the ungraspable images caught at the moment of now and highly charged, feeling of light, feeling of color, feeling of the sense of ephemerality, things are dissolving and becoming part of everything else in the spatial environment or the atmosphere, so to speak. So here is a classic cityscape with Indian yellow, which was included in the Sandy show. And then we have, go ahead, Anne.
No, I'm just saying a maelstrom of things that go. I mean, there's so much to take in and feel. It's very the whole right side is if painting or statuary, and then this explosive thing and this thing looking like jellyfish, the white form and the whatever gas smoke cloud coming out. No, it's amazing. And that yellow.
I mean, Anne, you live downtown, so after 9/11, so everybody was so impacted because of geographically where we lived, and I know that Martha was as impacted as anybody else who was down here, and so I think a lot of her work referenced that in a very oblique but powerful way.
It's so true. I was going to mention that, but you did it before I did, Elka. September 11 had a lot to do with the way I read it, but we can hold it for a few minutes. Let's see the next image. I think this is another classic of Martha, of the cityscape. So I thought be also interesting equally if we can see the next one, or next two rather. This is Span, and this one is the one that referred to what you just said directly few seconds ago, Elka, and I never seen this image until now. Yesterday we were selecting the imagery, and I just want to mention that when Anne mentioned earlier that a lot of poets wrote beautifully on Martha's work, Vincent Katz, Peter Sheldo for sure, and Eileen Mile, and certainly our late friend too, the great poet and critic Bill Bergson. And I remember Bill wrote about the idea of speed and how slow it takes us to look at this speedy painted imagery. So he say, only over time do we see that the strangely resolved surface-wide image is the point, and that its time of arrival is double, he say. Fast for color and light, slow for graphic statement. I thought that was really interesting because he's talking about the paradox is that those slow to be perceived surfaces evoke a kind of unscheduled rushes of perception that most keenly fall to sight in ordinary experiences. So in regard to how images get painted in various temperature, I think of them at temperature now. We saw that go into flame, the two images previously that Anne was making similar comment on it. I think about them in temperature from hot to cold, and the gradient, that line between. I can't help but thinking of our friend and David Levi Strauss in his amazing essay we published in the Rail years ago, picking up where you were talking earlier too, Ilka. He wrote this brilliant essay called "In Case Something Different Happened in the Future," Rosette Boy and September 11, which reveal how boys thought of the Twin Tower after its completion, just months before his arrival to New York in January. I can't remember the date now, but certainly 1974 from Dusseldorf. After, as you remember, that boys refused to come to America until the withdrawal from the U.S. troops from Vietnam. Yeah, I think he came to New York on a series of lectures. So when he was flying back from Minneapolis to New York, he performed a therapeutic operation by having recognized what would correspond to his theory of sculpture at the time. The Twin Towers were classic, I would say, crystalline forms, rigid, dry, and cold, like a basalt, columns of his famous 7,000 oaks. So I think boys, according to Levi, immediately did a few things in order to warm them up. He chose a 3D postcard image of the Twin Towers, then softened their sharp angles by tinting them yellow with a kind of a transparent glaze of yellow, making them look like two sticks of butter, a substance that is malleable and nurturing. Then he wrote on both of them. You can see here in blood red ink the name Cosmos and Damien, the twin Arab saints who were brought up by their Christian mother, known as the great itinerant healers. Under the Diocletian persecution, they were arrested, tortured, and burned, but they remain alive until they beheaded. So what is so prophetic about this image was that boys applied their name as a symbol of Christian and Muslim predicament. Why the Twin Tower, a symbol of global capital of capitalism, on one hand, and the other two saints as healers. So it's very, very spooky to see that painting of Martha. Can we go back again, Min? It's nearly disappear. It's particularly this incredible, birthmark that go around it. And Anyway, I thought be nice now we can stop. It's past 2 o'clock, and I would love it if somehow we can open up for everyone else is, I'm sure they have their own questions. So back to you, Min. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Phong. Thank you, Ilka. Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Anne. We have some questions from the audience. The first question is from GE, and I'm going to read on his behalf. Can we say the real power in Diamond's painting lies in the fact that her painting not only documents the landscape, but enacts sensory exploration, which then really transmits to us? Thank you, G, for the question.
And Joel,
Can you
Elka,
repeat the question? I sort of be boring. Just
yeah, can you read it again, Min?
read the question again.
Can we say the real power in Diamond's painting lies in the fact that her painting not only documents the landscape, but enacts sensory exploration, which then really transmits to us?
Well,
True.
well, first of all, they're not landscape, G. They mostly, yeah, so they are urban scape. There's the first painting that appear on the slide selection. I think that's a rare reference to nature. That's why I thought it'd be nice to put it first, but really she's a urban night painter. I don't know how to compare it to Alex Katz, because Alex managed to walk between nature and urban environment, because I think as soon as he and his beloved wife Ada able to buy a small house in Maine, they were able to spend half a year in New York and have in nature, but I don't think Martha ever talk about or make painting that reference nature.
Yeah.
So I would
Some of her small studies, I think she absolutely did reference nature, because she had a house in Maine, and then she got a house upstate New York. So she would spend at least 4 months in the country. And I think some of the forms, would reflect mountains in a very abstracted way. I mean, certainly she wasn't doing, like traditional still lifey things, but I think nature was present in some of her work. Absolutely. Maybe not the big paintings, but in the studies, absolutely, there was work that reflected the time she was spending out of the city, which I think she treasured.
Yeah. And any insight on that?
The sense of scale between the subject and the painter. Painting a city of huge buildings and facades that are kind of almost claustrophobic, and the individual painting it, and the kind of tenderness of the stroke and the thoughtfulness of the stroke. I mean, I think that is a very added attractive aspect about or engaging aspect of the world, whether one's aware of it or not.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that different than Giacometti doing a figure, and then, which is very reduced with a lot of hand activity in it, establishes this real dynamic scale.
Yeah.
Between one's own body and the depiction of a body and the hand that made it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I don't think there's any one aspect or any painting that's sort of thoughtful and considered is, never mind, pass.
And?
Well, just something about the elemental quality, and no people in her work, except that beautiful little thing you showed us, Ilka, with it your husband owned. But somehow that's so magnetizing, the elemental down to, I walk around my city. I like at night and just seeing what the grovel is below, and the these changing facades, this very quickly changing city we're in. And during COVID time, things shut up and boarded up, and always this sense of where's the sanctuary, where's the covering, these are all facades in a way. So what I find is a emotional back and forth all the time, kind of beauty, hope, fear, beauty, protection. I want to climb into some of these things she does.
Yeah.
Dominican also feeling very small, very, humans are about this big in this
Yeah.
cityscape.
Yeah. I think that's probably a good way to describe it, G. For some people, like Mondrian, was a slow progression from being a landscape painter, being a very rooted in, nature, gradually going through having discovered Cubism late in life, not until 1911 that he came to term with Cubism and then brought to the logical conclusion. So it's really coming to New York that make the late painting so special. Even though it's hard edge painting, he managed to mediate it in a neutral ground, which is a square format. And the adjustment of this beautiful, minute movement of the rectilinear from vertical horizontal, that's his way of celebrate the city with love, in a way, with vitality. With Martha's work, will soften up the edges. That may be her natural way of bringing nature into man-made architecture or substance. That's how one way we think about it. But yeah, Min, do we have any more questions?
Yes, we do. So we have a question from Jeffrey, and he's going to unmute himself and ask.
Oh, hi. Thank you. Sorry. It was just the Donna, Dennis, and Martha spent a lot of time together. They were in Paris, and they came here and they were hanging out over there with Anne at the St. Mark's. And they both have made architecture their thing, kind of, And I was just wondering, but their subject matter and their techniques and materials and all are quite different. And yet, tonality-wise, I'm wondering if there isn't some of the tenderness that we were talking about earlier in there. And I wanted to know, just hear from the people about what they might have, insights they might have into Donna and Martha informing each other somewhat.
Well,
I think Anne would know that very well.
Buildings and Martha's can be performative in a way that I think also Donna's are, that you feel, and in Donna's case, she built, a lot of these forms and the buildings and so on, and you can walk around them. They're can participate in a way, and I collaborated with her in a way I never got to collaborate with Martha. But yeah, I would agree about it's very interesting from maybe a feminist point of view, that idea of these structures, these built structures made of made of the things that buildings are made of, and why, what is that, the angles, why is it, which have always seemed more masculine from some point of view. But again, I don't want to load a lot of interpretation on top. I'm very wary of Joel's. I'm agreeing with him.
Priapic, I mean.
I just love this catalog because they're so eloquent. The poets in there are so eloquent about, seeing into, I guess. But that business, you can walk around a Donna piece. Also, Donna, working at night, the night pieces are kind of amazing. I feel like there's a little bit of parallel there. But I've thought of that thematically, in a way, there's some resonance, and they were very, very close their whole lives. So I have felt that too. I agree. Would be an interesting for you to write.
Yeah, to end up so close in that one way.
Yeah, super true. Yeah, Joe, anything to add, or and Elka before we move to the next question? No, nothing?
No, but I mean, I thought, of course, that, you know, that was something, I have a note, Donna, on my pad, and clearly they were, you know, influenced each other in terms of point of view. What, or subject matter, maybe,
Yeah.
or object. I don't know about the subject matter or something else.
Yeah.
Also, I feel like going it alone, you know, going it alone, it's almost like a hermetic way. And so that idea of shelter and hermetic and taking on these solid things, you know, to get in, penetrate, go inside, create, you know, see them through a different gaze,
No, it's interesting.
brave and humorous too.
Yeah. Min, any more question?
We have two more questions from the audience. Someone who chose to remain anonymous asked two questions. What was Martha's personality or demeanor like? They were also curious to hear more about Martha's recognition over the course of her career and maybe what contributed to these changes over time.
Well, maybe Joel is the most qualified since
I
Joel.
don't have, wasn't that close to Martha. I mean, Martha was, I always thought she was totally smart and bright and hip and had a real interesting point of view. And she was affable, looked a lot, looked hard at work, intelligent.
She preferred animals to people. We were at a
Like dogs, yeah, I know.
Yeah, she loved dogs. We were at Thanksgiving at my house, and she pulled me aside and asked me if my granddaughter was impaired. And I was, you know, I was quite shocked. And I said, what are you talking about? And she said, well, she's so immature. And I said, Martha, she's 2 years old. You know, she didn't really like, you know, children were not something that she enjoyed very much. She adored dogs, was happiest when she had dogs. And she was very hip. She was always hip. You know, she knew what was cool, and spoke her mind. And she would certainly never call her she would never have called herself a feminist, but I considered her a feminist. You know, she would not want you know, use that as a label. And she was a lifelong New Yorker, and she loved beautiful things. She had quirky taste. She was you know, a wonderful friend, and you know, I miss her dearly.
And anything to add to that?
I feel like she, as I was saying, determined living deliberately. I don't think she, you know, in terms of wanting family or children or a partnership that would be, you know, maybe demand. I can't speak to her relationships over the time, but you know, that sense of really her work being front and center,
Central.
and then the
Central.
central.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank
And
you. I
sacrifice that. You make a lot of sacrifices, and whether you're even aware of it.
But that's how we admire artists and poets, and we can't help but to surrender ourselves to our vision. Doesn't matter what happened.
And she had many dear friends. People like she knew John Giorno since 1965. You know, they were long-term friends. You know, she knew many people for many years. Frank and you know, Beth were certainly, you know, central in her life. You know, friends were important to her, and you know, and she traveled more when she was younger. As she got older, she traveled less.
Mm-hmm.
And she was a passionate reader.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she loved literature. She loved poetry. She loved music.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd like to add a little bit more to, now that I just remember reading Frank Rose's essay, very terrific essay. He mentioned, I'm just thinking out loud now because Joe make a very important reference to Guston. And just because of Frank somehow mentioned the great film by Alexander Sokurov. Remember Russian Ark, that film? 2002 or 3, I think. It's an experimental historical drama about an unnamed narrator wandering through the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg, who is a ghost drifting through all the rooms. From each he encountered countless real and fictional people in it from various periods in the city, 300 years history, wherever. But the whole thing was filmed all at once. There's no editing.
Yeah.
But that's a little far-fetched, interesting for me for sure to think, but to think about. But I like the reference to Guston, because Guston in 1967, after the Jewish Museum show, began to undertake things differently in his painterly, reconsideration about everything. In other words, he never liked minimalism. He detests minimalism. It was minimalism that marginalized his generation. First abstract expressionists, or New York School rather. But he were intelligent enough to use it. By that I meant like around 67, 68, 16, I think for the whole year, 67, 68, he began drawing online, only drawing, making drawing, 1 line, 2 line, 3 line. So it relates so much to the idea of what you say earlier too, Ilka, elemental. It's elemental. So it's stripping down the idea of making painting, one-shot painting. It's almost like one act, committing one act. It's not that different than the way that, Joe, we think of our friend Richard Serra making film, hand-catching lead or whatever, hand-touching colored paper. It's one action. That what counts. And I think, to me, that's so important to think in that context of how she dealt with minimalism without being minimalist. So there's much more. So I'm not going to say more. I think we say what we did here. So we just have to basically given the last few minutes to Ilka to read her beautiful poem, and we're going to see the show. So anyway, please, Ilka, it's your turn.
Oh, thank you. This was written for Martha's Memorial, which was a beautifully choreographed event at St. Mark's, and it's for Martha Diamond. You knew your cityscapes blazed with the beauty born of wet on wet, a technique you had no desire to teach or share. Even when these magnificent works were unsold, you knew their priceless worth. If the world swayed to minimalism or declared the death of your craft, it did not matter. A painter you were until the synopsises confused your clear mind, left you unable to make your markings. Here's what mattered to your heart: art, dogs, urban shine and shadows, friendships, pleasures, love that could last decades and smolder in the shadows. You loved marijuana, dancing, meandering your hometown streets. Childless by deliberate choice, a final gift arrived. A young woman who first came as assistant. Prepared to stretch canvas, she quickly transmuted to more than a granddaughter. She protected you from the second plague of your lifetime, nurtured your body, soul, and slipping mind. You left her and us a legacy of art. What I will miss most: a last-minute call to summon you to dinner, which sometimes failed your culinary desires. The delight of running into each other at Housing Works, both of us on the thrift hunt. Holidays at our house and how you called presents surprises, sharing a joint, a laugh, hitting the galleries where directors, those smart enough to know, came out of their offices to pay homage. Chic, opinionated, proud, you loved tall and handsome men. You read poetry, came to my readings. Poets had always been your tribe. I treasure a neighborhood photo, you with John, who you knew and loved for 50 years, with me and Ugo on a frozen Bowery morning, either going to or after brunch, smiling in the cold sunlight. And now you and John are both gone, the OGs of the Bowery, where you first arrived, a young, eager woman ready to conquer the universe, to capture New York, to dazzle your city, with diamond vision and your bright brush.
Thank you, Ilka.
Thank you, Ilka. That was beautiful.
Thank all you guys. I'm so happy to do this to celebrate Martha.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Joel and Ilka and Phong, for such a wonderful conversation. Thank you, Yaseman and Rokan from Berlin Rosen, and Jonathan from Joel's studio for their support in preparing for today's event. We'd also like to thank the Terra Foundation for American Art for sponsoring our NSE program and making these daily conversations possible, and for their support of our growing archive, which you can view on the Rail's YouTube channel. The Rail has been free and independent for 24 years. A donation directly supports our writers, production staff, and operations. Support our work through the link in the chat. And join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. for a conversation with Aaron Lehman, Timmy Simmons, and Alice Centimore about the forthcoming publication from Montez Press, Prepositions. And as it is a Rail tradition, you can now turn on your microphones and say goodbye as you leave.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much, Anne.
Great
Joel,
conversation,
Ilka.
Anne.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Phong.
Phong.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Joel.
Ilka, Anne, and Joel, and Phong.
Thank you, Anne.
Bye.
Ilka.
So much.
And please go to see the show, everybody.
Organize a bus.
We need a bus, Phong. We need a bus.
We will rent a bus Sunday, November 17th.
We want a disco bus.
That would be fun.
Party bus.
We can do that.
See you guys on the party bus.
Congratulations. We'll do get a bus. Okay, thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Thank you.